Welcome to day 209. We're in Isaiah, the last of Isaiah, 63 through 66. The Second Kings and Second Chronicles are just saying that Hezekiah, the king Hezekiah died, and then his son Manasseh takes over. So let's get into the rest of Isaiah, because this is some really awesome stuff again. So talking about in Revelation where those with ears should hear and listen and understand what the Spirit is saying to the churches. We hear that theme throughout some of this stuff as the people have turned away from God over the last half of the book. So, no ear or eye, 64:4. For since the world began, no ear has heard and no eye has seen a God like you who works for those who wait for him. So the people who are set apart get to see God's hands at work, and they hear what is going on in the world. And early on in the Old Testament, they walked with God and talked with God. Okay, the cool thing is in chapter 65, verse 9, so they're being exiled out of the land, and it says, I will preserve a remnant of the people of Israel and of Judah to possess my land. Those I choose will inherit it, and my servants will live there. There's something set apart here, okay? So let's get to the other stuff. 65:15. Your name will be a curse word among my people. For the sovereign Lord will destroy you and will call his true servants by another name. Christians, maybe? Okay, so set apart. And yet we still have the Jews today that don't recognize Christ as the Messiah, but yet they will in the tribulation time. So we have all these reasons to understand that we are set apart and that Christ did such a wonderful thing. Not because we're special, but because of what Christ did. And then we have another reference to a new heaven and new earth and some wonderful things about that time in 65:17. Look, I am creating new heavens and a new earth, and no one will even think about the old ones anymore. So that is a revelation time at the very end, chapter 22, I think it is, which personally for me, I knew it talked about it in places, but I didn't know exactly where, and I hadn't remembered to mark that down the last time I read it. So good things there. Keep going with that process in that time. So remember, we got the church age, we got the rapture, the 7 years of tribulation where the Antichrist rules, second coming of Christ, which we're going to talk about, and Armageddon, and then 1,000-year reign, the great white throne judgment, and a new heaven and new earth and eternity at this point. So we're talking in this time frame at this moment. No crying, no death too soon, 65:20. No longer will babies die when only a few days old. No longer will adults die before they have lived a full life. No longer will people be considered old at 100. Only the cursed will die that young. All right, so this period we're thinking is the 1,000-year reign. People will still be, normal people will live and be born, but nobody will die young, and people will live very, very long lives. Unless you are not good people, then you won't live past 100. Right now, you can't live past the age of 120. God's going to change that in the 1,000-year reign. If you're not a good person, if you haven't followed Christ, you're going to die at the age of 100. You have 100 years to figure it out. Nobody's going to die young during that time period. All right, moving on, 23 through 25. They will not work in vain, and their children will not be doomed to misfortune, for they are people blessed by the Lord, and their children too will be blessed. What a wonderful time to be born in the 1,000-year reign. I will answer them before they even call to me. While they are still talking about their needs, I will go ahead and answer their prayers. It is going to be such a cool time for us to watch Christ work in people's lives during the 1,000-year reign. Because remember, we're going to be in transformed bodies. We'll be raptured, brought back down at Armageddon, watch Christ defeat the nations of the world, and be with Christ and reign with Christ for 1,000 years on the earth. While there will be people left who are good people, there will be new babies born, and new generations that come up in that 1,000-year reign. And we get to see what Christ does for them. What a wonderful thing. The wolf and the lamb will feed together. We don't have to worry about them snatching a baby or killing anybody. The lion will eat hay like a cow. We'll be able to hang out with the lions. That's cool. But the snakes will eat dust. Amen. In those days, no one will be hurt or destroyed on my holy mountain. I, the Lord, have spoken. What an awesome thing that time period is going to be. All right. I have a reference here, May 15th, 1948. One of the greatest passages in the Bible, in my opinion. Verse 7, chapter 66, verse 7 through 9. Before the birth pains even begin, and we're talking about birth pains. We're going to see this in Matthew 24 when Jesus is telling his disciples what's to come, and they're asking for signs and stuff. Before the birth pains even begin, Jerusalem gives birth to a son, Christ. Who has ever seen anything as strange as this? Remember, Jesus comes from a virgin. Who ever heard of such a thing? Has a nation ever been born in a single day? May 15th, 1948. Has a country ever come forth in a mere moment? But by the time Jerusalem's birth pains begin, First World War, Second World War, but by the time Jerusalem's birth pains begin, her children will be born. Would I ever bring this nation to the point of birth and then not deliver it? Okay, so that's your key. Israel's there to stay. It's not going away. Granted, the Antichrist comes in during that 7-year period at the last 3.5 years and looks for these people, and they kind of scatter. Okay? No, I would never keep this nation from being born, says your God. Okay, so that extremely important passage about what happened in Israel getting their land back in one day. That's never, ever happened, and nobody would have ever thought of it. Talking about the second coming, verse 14 through 16. When you see these things, your heart will rejoice. You will flourish like the grass. This is the generation who maybe have been born at that time, May 15th, 1948, has seen these things happen over the last, 60 years. 70 years. That's important to note, the generation. When you see these things, your heart will rejoice. You will flourish like the grass. Everyone will see the Lord's hand of blessing on his servants and his anger against his enemies. See, the Lord is coming with fire. Okay, Christ isn't going to come back until the second coming. So this is a second coming passage. See, the Lord is coming with fire, and his swift chariots roar like a whirlwind. He will bring punishment with the fury of his anger and the flaming fire of his hot rebuke. The Lord will punish the world by fire and by his sword. He will judge the earth, and many will be killed. Moving on with that sentiment. So we're talking about Armageddon here, 18 through 21. I can see what they are doing, and I know what they are thinking. So we've already got this with God's attributes. He can see what they're doing, and he knows what they're thinking. He knows everything we're thinking. So I will gather all the nations and peoples together, and they will see my glory. I will perform a sign among them, and I will send those, I don't know what the sign is, and I will send those who survive to be messengers to the nations. Okay, so Armageddon happens. The people that survive are going to go and be messengers, okay? To Tarshish, to the Libyans and Lydians, who are famous as archers, to Tubal and Greece, and to all the lands, where? Beyond the sea, that have not heard of my fame or seen my glory. They will, I always hear this, well, what about the people who've never heard? God will rule and judge accordingly to people who have not heard, wherever they may be, in the darkest of jungles. And this is a passage about that. There they will declare my glory to the nations. They will bring the remnant of your people back from every nation. See, I said earlier, there will still be people, Jewish people, coming back to the land. They will bring them to my holy mountain in Jerusalem as an offering to the Lord. They will ride on horses, in chariots and wagons, and on mules and camels, says the Lord. And I will appoint some of them to be my priests and Levites. I, the Lord, have spoken. Okay, such a cool thing about that. Now, I want to read passage 24. This is a scene of what's happening. Let me just read it. And as they go out, so people will come and go to Jerusalem. As they go out, they will see the dead bodies of those who have rebelled against me. For the worms that devour them will never die, and the fire that burns them will never go out. All who pass by will view them with utter horror. Is that the people left from Armageddon? Or is it at the end of the 1,000-year reign where the ground were separated? Christ separates the good and the bad, and the saved and unsaved, and he removes the ground from underneath them, and they fall into the lake of fire and they burn forever. I believe that's part of it. And I think the dead bodies are the dead bodies left from Armageddon still there. So that's a kind of a hard time placement of where that is exactly. It might be both. Okay, so but the point is we're going to see that forever to remind us of what has happened. That's a crazy way to end Isaiah. It is absolutely a great book to read. Hopefully you got something great out of that. And then we're going to move on from there. So some great things coming. That is your day 209. See you tomorrow.